All right, so the first panel we're going to talk about is really going at probably one of the most direct impacts we're having from AI right now, which is around programming. And so I'm going to ask my three panelists here to just give a quick introduction to yourself. 1 or 2 sentences. Who are you? What are you working on? What background are you bringing to the table today?
Sure, I can go first. I'm Alan Pike. I'm a developer, designer, co-founder, most recently co-founder of Forestwalk Labs. And at Forestwalk, we use AI to help teams do their best work, and we're currently focused on building software that does task management and coaching.
Hi, I'm Brooklyn Zelenka. I'm currently between startups. Fission went under last year, sadly. These days, I am leading the privacy preserving technology and auth team at a research lab called Ink and Switch. And we're also working on AI safety.
Good morning. My name is Pilarinos. I'm the founder and CEO of Unblocked. I've been building software companies in Vancouver for a while. Previously, I worked at a company called BuddyBuild, which was acquired by Apple. I started the AWS office here. I worked at Microsoft. I've been building developer tools for the better part of 20 years. Unblocked basically helps engineering teams surface all the tribal knowledge that's locked in their source code in places like their messaging platforms like Slack, documentation systems, and bug trackers. So we make it really easy for people to ask a question and get an answer, among many, many other things.
Yeah, and I'm not going to date ourselves here, but Dennis and I are old enough that we went to undergrad together and got CS degrees a long time ago. So everyone here started off as a developer before we were talking about AI, right? And we've sort of seen this thing where, for a very long time, when we talked about IDs, when we talked about tools for helping us develop, it was more graphical in nature, right? And suddenly we got to autocomplete, and now suddenly we've gone stratospheric. Talk a little bit about some of the changes that each of you has seen in the way software is developed. And just from a personal standpoint, right, how has it changed your work from maybe what you did 5 or 10 years ago to what you're working on today? Maybe start with you, Dennis.
Sure. So I would openly admit that I'm a mediocre developer. And so a lot of the companies that I started as a consequence of my frustration trying to build something and being like, why is this so hard? And so I've recently, I love playing with these tools throughout my entire kind of career. I recently built an application using Cursor. How many people here use Cursor? Like if you're engineers, how many people use Claude Code? How many people use Visual, like VS Code? Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. So yeah, I use Cursor. You can debate on any given week which one's better versus the other. As a mediocre developer, I was absolutely blown away by this greenfield project that I wrote. I could basically instruct it to do the thing that I want it to do, and it got probably 90% of the way that I want it to. There's a lot of brain damage that it kind of spared me from. And then I was like, I'm a mediocre developer, but I'm very, very picky in terms of what I want the user experience to look like. And so then when I asked it to do something very specific to fix a bug that it introduced, it was like pathologically lying to me and basically like short-circuiting itself, repeating, oh yeah, you're right, that's not the way to do it, we'll do it this way instead. And I'm like, no, that didn't work. It's like, oh yeah, that's not right, let's go back to the first one instead. And so it's great, so how have things evolved? I could get to a place where I built this Mac app over the course of an hour, which would have just taken, that in an hour prior to this, I don't think I would have gotten to the documentation to like figure out code signing, right? And here I had this Mac app running, submitted, notarized, all of this stuff done, but I couldn't actually ever get it to a place where I felt really good about it. So it got me, for a greenfield project, absolutely amazing. They're fancy grep machines, and when they can't figure out what they're trying to do, they will just basically spin. And so then, if you don't understand the code that was written, you're really screwed. And as a mediocre developer, I was like, well, I'll just stash this for now and get back to it. Never finish it.
That pretty much sums up my experience as well. So if I have a task that is very common, so setting up a just standard React app, no problem. Can do it. It's seen it a million times. It can, basically recombine, the hundreds of millions of React apps it's seen before. As soon as you start dropping into even, other commonly used frameworks like, say, Vue, the quality degrades. And by the time you get to research software in Rust, it's just lying to me and spinning and saying, oh yeah, no, you're right. you told me to do A and I did B. Let's try it again. Oh no, I did B again. Weird. And it can just never break out of the pattern, right? I find it's really useful for tasks that I don't do often enough to have gotten good at. So if I need to configure, say, a Docker container or write a script, it gets me close enough that I don't have to have read all of the documentation, and then I can go in and make my tweaks. But for actual day-to-day work, really, really difficult, especially with something it hasn't seen before. The one place that I use it continuously, so I'm using a mixture of Claude and Copilot, is documentation. So I can write some code and then say, hey, write the documentation for it with a couple examples. And it's actually really good at that. Or if it gets it wrong, then we can adjust it a little bit. But the excuse of, oh, I didn't have time to document my code is in the past now.
My experience is a little bit different because my context is a little bit different. So as a software engineer, I don't know if I surpassed medium maybe, in abilities. But I worked as a software engineer for some time, and then as my first startup, I was writing code until eventually I became a manager and product leader. And that really scared me when we started Forestwalk last year, because it was me and a co-founder, and she's going to be the CTO, I'm going to be the CEO, and I'm kind of thinking am I going to be useful at coding? And she's like, you're going to be coding. There's only two of us. You're not just going to be producting and talking to customers only. And but I was extremely blessed that coincided with these models actually getting pretty good at least certain types of software, and we were building B2B SaaS in TypeScript, and they're really good at that, better than I was by far. And as I have, so I've been writing code assisted by either Cursor or Claude Code pretty much every day for the last year. And over that year, I've gotten from this kind of well, this is this crazy experiment that's lying to me and stuff, but I don't know what I'm doing anymore because I'm so rusty. So at least it's speeding me up. And now a year in, we've developed a large set of approaches and tools and guardrails and scripts and things that we use to get what I think is quite impactful acceleration, not just of how fast we can move, but also how ambitious we can be. As an early stage startup, it's just the two of us. We're just about to hire a founding engineer, and so we've gotten way further and bitten off way more than we would have previously have done in a previous generation in that first year using these tools, partially because we've aligned, this is a conscious decision when we were deciding we would have rather been writing Rails because we knew it and we like it and we like the vibe, but you try to get these models to write Rails and God help you with Rust. I'm sorry, it's very unfortunate. It's just unlucky, right? If you're oh, we're trying to write Rust, but the models just don't have a lot of training data on that. They have a lot of training data on React. I don't really like React and I don't particularly love TypeScript, but having somebody at all times that I can actually go back and forth with at 1 a.m. and be wait, so what is this syntax exactly, and what was this and help really, I can play the role of that architect and guardrail and manager, which is what I've been doing previously anyway, so I've gotten pretty practiced at that, and so having something that can chew through all of the stuff that's pretty mechanical has been pretty profound for us.
And by the way, I'm going to make a plug here. What is your blog address?
AlanPike.com, ALLEN. Pike.
Okay, Alan has an exceptional blog about his explorations through some of these tools from the perspective of kind of a very experienced software engineer. Highly, highly recommend it. Really, really good. Next question, sort of flowing off of that, is you think about your day-to-day, both as an individual and as a manager and sort of a founder today versus, say, 5 years ago. How has the way that you spend your time, specifically as it relates to developing software, so not managing people and things like that, how has that shifted, or has that shifted? No particular order, anybody, feel free to jump in.
All right.
Okay, I guess I got to point to people.
So I've built teams that I've run up to teams that are 300 people, and Unblocked now is 25 people. It's interesting. I think for greenfield applications, I think these tools are incredible, and they really help you get to a certain point very, very quickly. As you mature and get a legacy code base, code bases that are old or very large, these tools start to crumble and they fall down. They don't have a lot of the context that they need to actually get the job done, right? Imagine hiring someone, bringing them into the company, and then saying like, hey, the only context that you can have about how we build software here or how we build this application is just look at the source code, right? Which is crazy, right? Because they need to understand all this tribal knowledge. So like, how do we spend our time? We're using these tools to basically up-level the rate at which we can get people onboarded. But then also, Unblocked is trying to help solve getting all that context into the tools themselves. So it's very helpful for us. Like we use Unblocked to build Unblocked. And so for us, we're spending a lot of time up-leveling or improving this experience, right? So, there's a lot of people, finance, all the kind of startup stuff that you typically do. But you definitely see, I remember I was talking to VP of engineering at Motorola, and he had two teams that he was managing. One team back in the day when they were using Slack, and another team that wasn't. And he's like, you could just see the velocity of the team that was using Slack was a lot better. And so it's the same thing. Like there's certain engineers, kind of curmudgeon-y folks, 6-8 months ago, were very, very resistant to using these tools because of all the deficiencies. The thing you have to really internalize is that like today is the worst those tools are ever going to be. Like tomorrow will be better, the day after that will be better. And so those curmudgeon-y, naysayers 6 months ago are now using them, and you can see the rate at which they're actually improving. And so now what do we do is like, well, how do we up-level the quality of the tools so that they're like, even the curmudgeon-y naysayers are like very, very kind of bought into it or what have you. So.
Having once upon a time worked for Motorola, I know how curmudgeonly they are on that side.
In some ways, I actually think it's the wrong question. Professional software engineers have very good tools. It's a very competitive space. If there's something that's going to make them more effective, they're going to beg you for a license, and they're not doing that today. I think that the promise is there, but it's just not where it needs to be yet. On the other hand, people that are not professional software engineers can now write software. I think that's incredible. You don't have to scale to 100 million users. You can build something for you and your friends in an afternoon without having to have first spent 6 months, a year, 5 years getting good at software engineering. So thinking about it in the context of, yes, startups and business is helpful, but we were talking before the panel about some of this stuff. Spreadsheets in the 80s provided a programming environment for non-programmers. And now we have something that's much richer than that. And yes, spreadsheets, turn into these like horrible, monstrosities of, cross-linked, across all the different spreadsheets, and people who get really good at that and is very convoluted. Now they have tools to do things that are in other kinds of interfaces and to do more with less.
Yeah, every time I get a spreadsheet from a lawyer, I brace for impact. I was like, oh my God, here we go. What link doesn't resolve correctly? And so,
the original vibe coding was spreadsheets that went too far. So you mentioned, and we've gotten off your question, sorry, but you mentioned that programmers are not begging for licenses, and certainly if you're writing Rust, that's probably the case because the models suck at Rust. Because I've been kind of on the forefront and jumped into the deep end in this stuff over the last year, I'm often bothering my friends by telling them how great, the latest model is or whatever, and excited how it's been helping me. And it's been really interesting to see the process of some of the folks that I've talked to that 6 months ago were very cynical about it, and they're like, oh, look at this example where it did this totally bogus thing, and it doesn't understand Ruby or whatever, this is basically useless. I'm going to try to keep my team from checking in bad code or whatever, to having a light bulb go off, and not, the light bulb hasn't gone off for everybody, but light bulb goes off, and one of my friends who's a principal engineer at about a 500-person company, and 6 months ago was like, this is useless, said to me the other day, he said, I think I'm at the point now that if I wasn't allowed to use these tools, I would have to find another job because they're so much better. And that's someone 6 months ago who was like, I don't think that I can use them. And that's Ruby, which is a language it's like okay at. So I think it's like kind of a march for any given role. There's some roles that even years from now probably still they're going to be hand tweaking stuff. But to the actual question, which is how it's changed my day to day, it's just incredibly different. It's allowed me to be, if 2 years ago we'd founded this company and I was kind of 8 years rusty and had really only been writing code like a few times a month, and there's no way I would be writing code every day. It would have been kind of like, hey, we just sort of like have to bring on engineers earlier before it even made sense necessarily, before we'd figured out what we were building. But instead, I'm having a customer call, and I'm talking to them, and I'm seeing the demo, and they're screen sharing, and I see the problem, a bug, and then I go and I fix the bug, and then I push out a build within an hour, and then that's delightful for them. And so that product loop, as somebody who's kind of more on the product side as a founder, it's been really profound for me, being able to explore and experiment way faster if I have an idea of like, oh, actually, I think it would be really great like this, and I can try it, and then I'm like, no, it wasn't great, and I don't have to go through the process of writing up a PRD and then giving it to someone, and then they give me a demo and stuff like that. So it's, that's just one of the many ways I found it's really different now, for me at least.
And maybe just to jump off of those comments, one of the things you wrote about maybe a month ago was some epiphanies around how much you were spending on these tools relative to some other folks you know. Maybe you could just paraphrase that, because I found that to be just really interesting what you shared there.
Yeah, so we had Web Summit a few months ago here in Vancouver, and we had committed to give a demo of what we were working on before we had figured out what we were going to build, which, early stage startup stuff. They're like, hey, can you present? And we're like, yeah, sure. And so we'd been doing like this prototype a week thing and rapidly building, and of course, like leaning on these tools to explore different ideas and put them in front of customers. But it was getting serious. We were on this deadline, and we were like, we're going to be demoing in like 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. And that was when O3 had come out, which was the first like kind of good reason. Like, OpenAI 01 was like okay, but like so slow and so expensive for what you got. But O3 for a lot of people was this epiphany moment where they're like, giving the model a lot of time and a lot of money to figure the thing out actually has a really high ROI if you can get into a place where you can afford it that time. And so I'd been finding that I would be working on something and it would be lying to me and it would get stuck in a corner. It couldn't follow all of my cursor rules. But then I would switch to O3 from the other, I'd been using Claude Sonnet 3.7. I would switch to O3, and then it would actually like do it. And then it would get to a certain point, and it would follow my rule where I said, if you're not sure, stop and ask me questions. And if there's an architectural trade-off, let's talk about it. And it would actually do that. And so I was using O3, but then the cursor pop up, it would say, oh, you've hit your $50 limit. Oh, you've hit your, okay, we'll go to $100. Oh, you've hit your $100 limit. I'm like, So I turned to my co-founder, and I'm like, Jen, I think I have an idea. You're going to hate it. What if we just used O3 as our default model for this month, and we increased our cursor monthly spend to $1,000 to just do that? And she's like, that's a lot of money. And I'm like, I really think it's just meaningful. I think it's making me enough more effective that if you imagine how much we would pay ourselves as founders, it's going to be worth it. And so we did it for a month, and it was actually really great. Luckily for us, then they cut the price of O3 to a fifth of what it was, and then 4.1 Opus came out in Cloud Code, and so we can get similar results. But we spent $1,000 per person in a month. And I was like, I'm like, oh man, when I tell the investors this, like they're going to be so like suspicious. And so I kind of test flighted it with one of our investors. Most of our investors are all founders. And he's a technical leader at his much larger company. And I said like, I think we might be, like, we're thinking about allowing it to spend $1,000 a day. And he's like, $1,000 a day? $1,000 a month, sorry. He's like, I said, we're going to say $1,000 a month. And he said, $1,000 a month? Like, I'm not spending more than $50 a day. And I'm like, well, that's $1,000 a month. So he's like, oh, you're good then. Cool. Although it does actually, the one thing about startup thing is if you're working more than 40 hours a week, you spend more. so watch out for that. But yeah, so we're not necessarily needing to spend that much, but it can really actually pay off, in my view, for the right tasks. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to ask one more question, then maybe we can have time for a couple questions from the audience. Last question goes back to this idea of personnel. To what extent have you changed what you're looking for or what you're interviewing for when hiring developers? So are you materially testing differently? How are you testing them? What are you looking for today versus, say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually an interesting problem to figure out, like, to what degree do you, if through the interview process, to what degree do you allow people to use these tools? Because then how do you assess how good a coder they are, right? Like, is this, if you were, I always like giving these kind of analogies of like, a carpenter, what have you. Would you take the hammer away from a carpenter and be like, now frame that house?
It was like 10 years ago, right? It was like, do you let them have access to Stack Overflow during the interview or whatnot?
Yeah, of course. Like, so in the same way for our interview process, we don't ask people to write code on a whiteboard because I've never seen in a day-to-day job to be like, go ahead, write this code and it has to compile this. It's just insane. It's ridiculous. So I think it's a big red flag if you don't use the best tools as a practitioner, right? Like, honestly, if you're a framer building a house and you're not using a nail gun, I don't want you working on my project. Right? Because I was like, why? You're going to take forever to get this thing done, and you're not thinking about this in an efficient way. So I think we specifically look for people to be able to do that. But then, as they go through that process, if they don't understand what architectural decisions were made, what are the trade-offs, benefits, so on and so forth, we tend to hire kind of senior level folks that have this experience. They might use these tools to help construct that, but we look for the things. We look to assess what things that they can have strong opinions on based on their requirements to assess how much experience or skill they have. So yeah, I think if you're not using the tools, it's actually interesting. Like for engineers, I think this is kind of a no-brainer. As we think about hiring different functions with the organization, we're looking at hiring a head of marketing, a VP of marketing type person, and if they're not using any of the AI tools that are available in their capacity, that's a hard red flag for me. Like I won't even consider continue the conversation.
Yeah.
And so that's a variant of how I think about it for engineering.
Well, that's a good point. One of my co-founders was a designer by trade. She went to fine art school. She regularly uses these tools to do her own prototyping now, right? And she won't work with anybody who technical or not, does not use these on a regular basis. Other thoughts?
So when I interview people, I'm still interviewing the same way. I'm looking for fit, background, are they able to learn? Do they have a good growth trajectory? Do they have can they have a intelligent conversation about the kinds of things that we're working on? And except for the AI safety stuff that we're working on, which then of course you need to have some familiarity with these tools, I don't really care what your tools are. How effective are you at the end of the day? And I know that there's a lot of talk right now about you should only interview people and really find out if they can basically run a stable of AI agents that are going to go off and code for them. If you want to work that way, great. If you're more effective hand-rolling code, great. And if you have something in between, amazing. The main place I've been using AI in hiring is on the communication side. Writing rejection letters in an interview process is difficult, and saying, hey, here's the bullet points of the conversation I had with the person, there's still a no, can you please help me write that, has really taken the edge off of having to write 12 rejection letters in a day.
Yes. So we're just in the process of ramping in, we're basically drafting our founding engineer job ad this week. So I can't speak with iterative experience about how we've been changing our hiring credentials and how that's played out. But the way that we're thinking about it from being immersed in this stuff for so long is that the relative value of a hire, of being able to reason about system architecture has gone up because more code is being written and the models will copy the patterns in your code, and there's more leverage that you can get now just as an individual contributor of being. It used to be individual contributors who are maybe more junior on the team, they're just sort of filling in the gaps. But if the part that's just kind of the typing that fills in the gaps is now going to be performed faster and faster by these tools, which means the ability to reason about, okay, well, what are the trade-offs of taking on this dependency, and how legible is this pattern? When is this going to break down? When do we need to pull the line and say, whoa, this is going to get way too messy and we're never going to be able to untangle it? That's the kind of stuff that everybody on the team benefits from doing. And so we've increased the relative importance of that in how we think about, and decreased, not that we ever really focused on do they know the exact syntax of this thing? It used to be kind of I don't know, it's kind of weird that they don't know the exact syntax of this thing. And now it's just that's not important. It was low importance and now it's zero. But that's one of the big changes for us in terms of how we think about it.
All right. I said I was going to give all this time for audience questions and then totally monopolized it, so we have time for one question from the so the question was, with so many new models and such a high rate of development in the tools themselves, how do you avoid spending half of your time just trying out new tools and bouncing around and things like that?
Yeah, I don't think you should avoid it. I think you should actually be chasing these things aggressively. Yeah, I think that's like an anti-pattern in my mind. Like in most of the tools, against my design aesthetic, there's a drop-down where you can choose which model you want to use. I find that offensive as a product person, because I was like, and so for Unblocked, you don't get that choice. You just like, we're just going to choose the best one for you all the time. But yeah, I think most developers want to have the fidelity to be able to go and choose that because, I don't know, most of us like to be able to chase the shiny bauble. Let's see what the best one is.
There's definitely a pit where you can spend all your time doing that kind of thing. But when it comes to your coding model as a developer, the switching cost to Dennis's point is so low that one of the rules that we have at Forestwalk, we never say Cursor did this or Claude Code did this. We say Opus did this or GPT-5 High did this because we're helping each other build the mental model as we're doing the experimental learning about what they're good and bad at all the time. And I think that's, for now, kind of just part of the job. I find it fun. I like playing around with things, and I don't feel like it's a time suck. Like, yeah, sometimes I'll try something and it doesn't, and go back to the previous model. But they're also, a lot of them, at least for TypeScript, they're all pretty good now. So I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to echo what both of them said. If you've hired curious engineers, they're going to be playing with this stuff in their free time anyway. Fine, I'm currently at a research lab. We over-index on curiosity, right? But at least my colleagues right now are playing with all of these models, even though, like, I'm a skeptic and I'm working on AI safety, and I think that there's all of these other things that we need to think about when it comes to LLMs. But I'm playing with all of them too, just to see what they can do, because it's interesting. And whatever tool people decide to use, like, you could standardize on a single one, but we have people using, some people really like Claude, some people really like Copilot, some people, whatever the tool is. And it comes up in conversation. Oh, I found that the new model, from Anthropic's really good. We should all try it. And so it doesn't become this like top-down, oh, everybody's now going to switch from this model to that model. Let your engineers tell you and guide you.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate you all joining. Stick around. We're going to go right into the next folks. And keep an eye out for these guys during the office hours.